Listen, if you've gotten to a place in your relationship where you kind of hit the wall and feel like things might be over, or you know somebody who's in that spot, that can be frustrating because oftentimes we don't know how we got there. We just know we're there and it feels like we've gone too far or it's gotten too bad and we don't even know how to turn things around. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 4 things that may be killing your relationship. One of those is the greatest predictor of divorcing couples. And because I don't want to leave you stuck in the mess, if you recognize one of these things in your relationship, I'm going to talk about 4 things you can do to turn your relationship around. That's today on Relation Shots. Welcome to Relation Shots. My name is Eric Wooten. If this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss upcoming videos. And if you want a free guide to intimacy, hit the link in the description area below. We've also got some other resources, classes, courses to help you in your relationship. So listen, nobody starts off a relationship with the intent of doing things that will eventually lead to the failure of the relationship. At least most people don't. And if they do, that's probably a whole nother video on how to identify a sociopath and stay away from them. But in my experience, in all the weddings I've officiated, there has existed a bride and groom standing at the altar believing that they are going to have a great future together, dreaming about the relationship they're going to have, believing this is the person that they're going to have that relationship with. But then somehow, many couples end up divorced somewhere down the road. Now, there's nothing more frustrating than finding yourself at a place in the relationship where you feel like it's over, you don't know how it's gotten so bad, and you're just kind of stuck because you're like, I don't even know how we got here, so I don't know how to get out of here. So in today's video, I want to talk about 4 behaviors that, if they exist in your relationship, will almost certainly at some point lead to the demise of the relationship. And if you recognize some of these things, I'm going to give you 4 things you can do to turn the relationship around so that it doesn't have to end in failure. Dr. John Gottman calls these 4 things the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so we're going to run through those 4, and then I'm going to give you 4 behaviors to correct each of these things. So the first behavior is criticism. Criticism is simply anything that you do that is an attack of the other person's character. So understand the difference between a complaint or a critique and a criticism. A complaint or a critique is specific. You're addressing a specific behavior that you would like change, whereas criticism is just attacking the person holistically. You're just going after them. So a criticism and a complaint sound the same, but they have a different focus. So here's an example of a complaint. The complaint might be, hey, it's a little bit frustrating that you didn't let me know you're going to be late again for dinner because we had talked about you doing that so that the dinner's not cold when you get here. That's a complaint about a specific issue. A criticism is, I can't believe you came home late again. You always do this kind of thing. You're never thinking about me. You're always thinking about yourself. You're so selfish. In fact, I'm never considered in this relationship. That's a criticism. You're attacking the person. You're holistically describing who you think they are. A complaint is just going after the specific thing. So if criticism exists in the relationship and is pervasive in the relationship, at some point it's going to continue to grow and escalate and elevate. And at some point it's going to move into the next behavior, which is far worse. And that second behavior is contempt. Now, contempt is where you've gotten to a place where you're just downright mean, disrespectful, there's sarcasm, there's eye rolling, there's dismissal of the person. Contempt is where you've taken criticism to a whole nother level, that not only are you going after and attacking the person, but contempt is this moral superiority where you actually are looking down your nose at the other person and who they are in the relationship. Contempt looks a lot like this. Someone comes in, your spouse comes in and says, man, I'm so tired. And your response is, oh, you're tired. Oh yeah, must have had a real rough day at work. Well, I've been running around with the kids all day, every day, and you're at that job sitting down, sitting on Zoom meetings all day, only to come home flop down on the couch, wonder where dinner is, play your stupid video games. Could you be any more pathetic? That is contempt. That negativity underlying and simmering time after time after time has gotten you to a place where you can't even stand the other person anymore. And sometimes you get to a place where it ain't even worth criticizing them anymore because you have so much contempt for them. And watch this. Contempt is the #1 predictor of divorce in relationships. So this is what you want to avoid at all costs. So #1 is criticism. #2 is contempt. The third one is defensiveness. And defensiveness is just simply when you get defensive every time your partner brings any kind of valid critique or complaint to you. And basically, here's what defensiveness does. Defensiveness says, you know what? I'm not to blame. You're to blame. Whatever they brought to you, you're defensive and you say, listen, this isn't my issue. And by default, if it's not my issue, then it must be your issue. Defensiveness is you coming back anytime they say anything with a defense of either why you're not guilty, or the defense can be a counterattack of why they have done this just as often as you have done it, and it puts your spouse eventually in a place where they can't even bring something to you because they know that you're going to turn around and shove it back on them. That's defensiveness. And the fourth behavior that negatively impacts and may be a predictor of divorce in relationship is stonewalling. And stonewalling is just simply when you withdraw and you stonewall, so you basically push the other person away. You do not give them access to you anymore. This may be the silent treatment. This may be a physical removal. But basically, you've gotten to a place where you said, you know what, dude, I'm not even dealing with this anymore. And so you got your stuff, I got my stuff. I'm just going to sit over here. Now, oftentimes, the reason we stonewall is because we become what psychologists say is emotionally flooded, where the emotions have raised so high that we can't even really process the conversation or conflict anymore. And so we're stonewalling simply because it's too much for us in the moment. There's a healthy way to do that we're going to talk about in just a moment, but just plain stonewalling is going to put the other person in a position where they don't have access to you anymore, where they're not able to bring stuff to you anymore, and at some point they're just going to quit bringing stuff to you because they know, if I bring this up this time, this is going to lead to the silent treatment. It's going to ruin the next 3 days, and I can't handle that. And so you get to a place where your partner is no longer bringing anything to you for fear that they'll get stonewalled, pushed away. You'll withdraw and avoid them for days, maybe weeks in the relationship. That's stonewalling. So if you recognize any 4 of those behaviors in your relationship, it's not a good thing, and it may be an indicator of where you're headed. Now, it doesn't mean if they exist that your relationship is already doomed. It just means you better turn the corner pretty quickly and change the atmosphere of the relationship if you want this thing to last. If you allow criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling to continue in the relationship, it is inevitable that that relationship will end at some point. So if we recognize it, we don't want our relationship to end. What are some things you can begin to do? Well, for each one of the behaviors, we have a solution or antidote, and I want to run through each of those real quickly. So if you recognize that criticism is something you often do in the relationship, a solution to criticism is what is called the soft startup. So remember, criticism is when we generally attack, and a complaint is when we get specific. So instead of saying something like this in a conversation, man, all you ever do is talk about yourself. You don't ever want to hear about me. You don't care about me. The you statement usually is going to include blame with it, and that's criticism. So using an I statement is more of a soft startup. You may say something like, I feel like we've not gotten a chance yet to talk about myself in this conversation, and I really need to vent. So is it okay if we talk about my day? You're basically saying the same thing, that the other person's only talking about themselves and you want to talk about yourself, but using an I statement instead of a you statement is a soft startup. Remember, you usually attaches blame, and I statement allows you to do a soft startup and bring a complaint without it leading to criticism. So that's criticism. The next one is contempt. So if you see contempt in the relationship, you need to think appreciation. The solution to contempt is creating an atmosphere of appreciation. And oftentimes in a relationship, we don't appreciate enough. We take for granted the little things. We don't look for opportunities to appreciate one another. Experts say we really need a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative in the relationship. So you need to create a culture of appreciation in your relationship. Look for opportunities daily to appreciate your partner, to point out things that you're encouraged by, that they do well. Because when you create this positivity, and guess what? When you appreciate them, not only do they have positive feelings, but you begin to feel positive about them. And when positive feelings exist, the negative statements are not going to be near as damaging, and you'll be able to take a relationship atmosphere that's one of contempt, and you'll be able to change it into one of appreciation and eliminate one of the biggest predictors of divorce. So appreciation on a regular basis can eliminate one of the greatest predictors of divorce in the relationship. If you recognize defensiveness in your relationship, this is real simple. Instead of being defensive, just take responsibility. Don't put whatever it is they're bringing to you back on them. Take responsibility, and it doesn't matter how small your part of the conflict was. If it was 2% of the conflict, take responsibility for the 2%. Say, I own this. I'll work on doing this better. And you begin to create an atmosphere where defensiveness is not reigning by just simply taking responsibility for what you can take responsibility for. And the last one, stonewalling. If you notice that you have a tendency to stonewall, the solution is you need to learn how to self-soothe. So when John Gottman did research in his lab, what they found is when conflict was creating an escalation or creating more problems in a relationship, they would step in and tell the couple to stop for a minute so they could fix the equipment. And they noticed letting the couple read a magazine or just listen to music or relax for 20 to 30 minutes before they came back, their heart rates went down, their blood pressure went down. So you've got to figure out when the relationship or the conflict is escalating and you feel emotions starting to rise too high, you've got to be able to just call a timeout. Go find something to do for at least 20 minutes. It takes at least 20 minutes for the physiology of the body to come down and relax a little bit. Whether it's reading, whether it's taking a walk, whether it's listening to music, whether it's exercising, doing something to self-soothe a little. Say, listen, I'm getting to a point where I'm too emotionally charged. I need a little break, and let's come back and talk about this in an hour or two. But when you learn how to self-soothe, you will not have to stonewall. Give the silent treatment, withdraw from them in order to figure out what's going on with your emotions. You can take a little break, set a time to come back, and begin to resolve the issue again. So if you notice any of these four, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling in your relationship, it does not mean it's over. It just means it may be headed to a place where it's going to be tough to recover. So you want to act now to begin to remove these behaviors from your relationship. So if it's criticism, remember the soft startup. I statements, not you statements. If it's contempt, appreciation. Create a culture of appreciation in your relationship. If it's defensiveness, take responsibility. Even for small acts that you have performed in a relationship, just take responsibility and create a new atmosphere. If it's stonewalling, learn how to self-soothe. There may be many techniques you can use to self-soothe and then come back and resolve the conflict at a time where you're more emotionally ready to handle the situation. So I'd love to hear your comments about this in the section below. Maybe you have some techniques on self-soothing that have worked in your relationship. If you think this would be helpful to a friend, consider sharing the video with them, and I'll see you back here next time on Relation Shots.